Imagine you're walking across a vast desert. The temperature is dangerously hot. You're traveling westward on a mission to locate someone in a country to the west. You are not alone. In fact, you are following three men by the names of Melchior, Caspar, and Balthazar. These men are extremely motivated to make this dangerous trip. They feel as if they are being guided by a powerful force. There, ahead of them, is a blazingly bright star in the western sky. This is a scene from more than 2,000 years in the past. This is a story of a star that led three men to the city of Jerusalem and to the town of Bethlehem and a newborn child. You certainly recognize this as the familiar Christmas story of the Star of Bethlehem. For centuries, people have wondered about that star. Most of our common, modern-day ideas come largely from things like Christmas cards. To get the correct version of this story, we need to check the second chapter of the biblical book of Matthew. This is the source of the Star of Bethlehem story.
There came wise men from the east to Jerusalem, saying, "Where is he that is born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east and have come to worship him." Then Herod, when he had privily called the wise men, inquired of them diligently what time the star had appeared. When they heard the king, they departed, and lo, the star which they saw in the east went before them, till it came and stood over where the young child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced with exceeding great joy. Matthew chapter 2, verses 1, 2, 7, 9, and 10.
Matthew's account makes no mention of the names of these wise men or how many there were. It does not tell us what the star looked like. For that matter, it doesn't even say it was bright. Over the centuries, these few sentences in the book of Matthew have been greatly embellished. If the story is true, what did the star really look like? Is it possible that the account in Matthew is based on some natural celestial object or some unusual celestial events? Clearly, whatever the Star of Bethlehem was, it must have been something special to the wise men. That begs the question, who were the wise men and where did they come from? Ancient paintings have depicted them wearing the robes of Zoroastrian priesthood. Zoroastrianism was a religion that originated in ancient Persia. To get to Bethlehem from Persia, they would have traveled westward more than 500 miles. The label of wise men indicates they were highly educated and leaders of this religion. They were likely fortune tellers or magicians. The term magi has often been used to describe them. They used astrology to predict the future for government leaders. Despite what you hear in legends and songs, there is no evidence that they were kings. According to Matthew, the wise men saw the star twice, in the eastern sky at its rising, and again after their visit with King Herod. The phrase, "at its rising," appears in modern translations of the Bible. It means the star was seen rising in the east just prior to sunrise. The scriptures do not actually say the star led them across the desert to Jerusalem, but if it did, it changed locations from the eastern sky to the western sky. We are told that after the wise men had seen Herod, the same star appeared again and directed them south to the town of Bethlehem and the newborn child. So what did the wise men actually see in the sky? Many ancient societies kept careful records of the night sky, and some survive to this day. Even if nothing can be found in these ancient records, we may be able to get some clues by computing the positions of the sun, moon, and planets for the time of Christ's birth. In either case, we need to know the date of Christ's birth. You may be surprised to learn that the actual date is a bit uncertain. Christ was born to humble parents, so no official birth records were kept. The Christian Church assigned the task of establishing the birth date to Dionysius Exiguus. He calculated the date by counting the reigns of Roman emperors. In his scheme, there is no year 0, so the years jump from 1 BC to 1 AD, and the birth year of Christ would be 1 BC. That is confusing enough, but Dionysius also made a counting error. He missed an emperor. Correcting for this, the birth of Christ was in the year of 5 BC. This birth year can be checked by the timing of King Herod's death. Obviously, he was alive when the wise men arrived, so his death marks the latest possible date for the birth of Christ. We do not have an exact date for Herod's death, but in the book The Antiquities of the Jews, written by the ancient historian Josephus, it was written that he died not long after an eclipse of the moon. We can use computers to track the motions of the Earth and Moon back in time to search for lunar eclipses visible from Jerusalem around 2,000 years ago. This search turns up a likely match. You now see the lunar eclipse as it was seen in Jerusalem March 13th, 4 BC. This increases our confidence that 5 BC is the correct year for the birth of Christ. Now that we have a date, what kind of celestial object are we looking for? What would have been so powerful, so compelling to the wise men, that they would risk their lives to cross 500 miles of desert? Being astrologers, the wise men carefully watched the skies and the motions of the planets. They were highly educated and familiar with the Jewish prophecies of a coming Messiah. That includes the prophecy of Balaam, that centuries earlier associated the birth of a Messiah with a star. So it seems likely that the Star of Bethlehem was an event or a series of events that were interpreted by the wise men to have astrological significance for the Jewish people. For ancient people, the word star often took on different meanings than it does for us today. For example, sometimes comets were referred to as stars. Also, the word star didn't always refer to a single celestial object, or even a single event. Let's consider some candidates for the Star of Bethlehem. First, it seems unlikely that it was an ordinary star because they are so common and lack any special significance. Shooting stars are less common. Even though they can be spectacular, they're only visible for a few seconds. Actually, these objects are properly known as meteors. On any clear night in a dark location, a person can see about 6 in an hour. A few times each year, there are meteor showers where it's possible to see nearly 100 per hour. They are small bits of interplanetary dust falling to Earth. They heat the air along their paths, making a bright streak. Meteor showers are recurring annual events, so it seems unlikely the wise men would attach any special significance to them. A comet is another possibility. Comets are made of ices, dust, and bits of gravel. They're just a few miles wide and they orbit the Sun. They usually have very elliptical orbits that stretch from near the Sun to beyond the outer planets. When comets get near the Sun, the ices are heated to form a tail of gas and dust that can be millions of miles long. If a comet's orbit takes it near the Sun, it can be a magnificent sight in the night sky. Modern astronomers have cataloged many hundreds of comets. Using their known orbits, we can trace their motions back in time. It turns out that none of these would have been properly positioned in 5 BC to be the Star of Bethlehem. However, this does not exclude the possibility that a bright comet made an appearance in 5 BC and then retreated into the outer solar system and has not returned since. Such a comet would not be in our modern catalogs. So all we can do is to check ancient records to see if a comet was actually seen. The Chinese recorded 2 kinds of special objects: comets and guest stars. Today we know that these guest stars were actually exploding stars, or novae. The Chinese records tell of the appearance of a bright object in 5 BC. Unfortunately, the record for the 5 BC object is unclear to its type. The ancient text says the object was stationary with respect to the stars for 70 days. Comets orbit the Sun, so they appear to slowly move. For that reason, many astronomers have interpreted the 5 BC object to be a nova. However, in his 2015 book, The Great Christ Comet, Revealing the True Star of Bethlehem, Colin Nichols proposes the 5 BC object was a comet. Nichols has found a possible orbital path for a comet that he believes matches the events of the Book of Matthew. According to Nichols, the comet didn't appear to move in the sky for 70 days because it was inbound from the outer solar system and moving almost straight toward the Earth. It would have appeared in the morning sky just before sunrise. The wise men would have seen the comet at its rising in the constellation of Virgo. As the comet receded from the Sun, it passed over the Earth's north pole. This would have caused its location to change from the early morning eastern sky to the evening western sky. Nichols believes this would have directed the wise men westward toward Jerusalem. There is one big problem with Nichols' comet idea. At times, this comet would have been so close to the Earth, it would have appeared very large and exceptionally bright. In fact, it would have been visible during the day. It would have been the brightest comet ever. The Chinese records do not indicate the 5 BC comet was particularly special. It's also hard to believe that there are no historical reports of a comet that bright from around the world. The Star of Bethlehem was likely something that didn't attract widespread attention. The biblical account indicates that Herod was unaware of it. The Star of Bethlehem may have been something that meant a lot to the wise men, but not to the general population. So perhaps the object reported by the Chinese in 5 BC was not a comet, but an exploding star. Most stars have a very constant brightness, but on rare occasions a star may become unstable and explode, becoming 10,000 times brighter, making it become visible to the unaided eye for the first time. Such a star is referred to as a nova, meaning new. But would a nova have been significant enough to motivate the wise men to begin a long and dangerous journey in search of the Christ child? Over the many years, people have suggested that the Star of Bethlehem was a series of astrologically significant planetary conjunctions. During the year, the Sun appears to move through different constellations. The constellations that lie along the Sun's annual path are called the signs of the zodiac. In addition to the Sun, there are 5 bright star-like objects. They are called planets, from the Greek word for wanderers. The planets Mercury and Venus moved back and forth from the west side to the east side of the Sun. They were usually seen in the twilight sky after sunset or before sunrise. Unlike Mercury and Venus, the planets Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn can be high in the sky at midnight. Throughout the year, these planets usually moved slowly from west to east, but when they are positioned opposite the Sun in the sky, their motion would reverse for a few days or weeks. This apparent reversal of a planet's motion is called retrograde motion. As we watch the planets move in the night sky, there can be times when one planet will appear close to another. When this happens, the planets are then said to be in conjunction. They are not actually near each other in space, but from our location on Earth, one planet is seen along our line of sight near the other. With the Earth and planets in constant motion, planetary conjunctions are not unusual. But astrologers may consider such events significant and meaningful depending on which planets are involved and the constellation they are passing through at the time. Could the Star of Bethlehem have been one or more planetary conjunctions of special astrological significance to the wise men? With modern computers and our Planetarium star projector, we can check. What you now see is the sky as it appeared to the wise men in the spring of 7 BC. Day by day, Jupiter was getting closer to the planet Saturn, and by May 29th, they stood in conjunction. In the coming days, the planets separated as Jupiter moved toward the east. By mid-June, they both had begun retrograde motion to the west. By September 30th, 7 BC, the two planets were in conjunction for a second time. They then separated while they continued moving toward the west. By mid-November, their westward motion stopped, and they began moving toward the east again. Once again, Jupiter overtook Saturn, and there was a third conjunction on December 4th, 7 BC. A triple conjunction of two planets is an unusual event that happens only once every 140 years on average. For many astrologers, Jupiter was known as the King's planet, and Saturn was thought to represent Jehovah, the God of the Jews. So, these three meetings of these planets would have been considered significant. Also, the planets were seen in the constellation of Pisces, the fish. For some people, that constellation was the symbol of Palestine, and the fish was a sacred sign to the Jews. Astronomer Mark Kidger proposes that the Star of Bethlehem was actually a series of events. The first of these was the 7 BC triple conjunctions of Saturn and Jupiter, 2 years before the birth. The next event happened a year later in 6 BC. There was a gathering of 3 planets, Jupiter, Saturn, and Mars. In the western sky, the crescent moon was very close to the planet Jupiter. Just a bit farther to the west, Mars is paired with Saturn. Once again, these planets are in the astrologically significant constellation of Pisces. A year later, in 5 BC, another planetary group occurred. Once again, the moon is very close to the planet Jupiter, but now Saturn, symbol for the god of the Jews, is paired with Venus, the mother planet, and again it's in the constellation of Pisces. As time progresses this night, the last glow of evening twilight fades. Saturn, Venus, the Moon, and Jupiter approach the western horizon. The prominent constellation of Orion is in the southwest. About this time, the bright star Sirius reaches its highest point in the southern sky. Even higher in the sky is the zodiacal constellation of Gemini, with the bright stars Castor and Pollux. By 11:30, the spring constellation of the Lion, Leo, is high overhead, and to its east is Virgo. This large constellation is made of many faint stars, and just one bright one called Spica. Above Spica is the red star Arcturus. This is the brightest star in the constellation of Boötes, the herdsman. In the southeast, another red object is rising, the planet Mars. The nightly progression of the stars is something the wise men would have followed for its beauty and its astrological messages. For 2 years, they had watched groupings and conjunctions of planets that indicated to them something important is about to happen. In this early morning spring sky of 5 BC, there was something very unexpected, something new. In the constellation of Aquila, there's a bright star where none had been just the night before. This is the nova of 5 BC reported by the Chinese. Mark Kidger believes the nova was the final event that marked the Star of Bethlehem. All the earlier planetary groupings in Pisces gave special meaning to this bright star. It was the final event, the final sign. So what was the Star of Bethlehem? Was it an exceptionally bright comet? Was it a series of planetary conjunctions? Was it an exploding star? Or was it something else? We may never know. Despite all the research, there is just too little information to know for sure. For many people, this is unimportant. For them, the star needs no natural explanation, and it may not have one. In fact, none of our ideas can explain the entire behavior of the star described in the book of Matthew. But in the end, for Christians around the world and of all denominations, the star is not the most important part of the Christmas story.